So hello and welcome to another Things That Spark Joy video. And in this episode I'm going to be taking a look at the book we have in front of us, which is the N.W.O.B.H.M Encyclopedia by Malc Macmillan. It's published by On Pages, which I believe is a German publication. And they've done some previous books to this, although they have been in German. I believe this was the first book about N.W.O.B.H.M that was published in English. And this came out in 2001, and I suspect I bought it sometime after then. It really is a gold mine. I think the book was in some ways also, in addition to people that were really interested in an in-depth analysis of all of the bands that formed part of the genre, I think the book also forms a useful resource for record buyers, just because of the way everything is listed in here. One interesting thing about it, and I actually quite like, is it really does focus on the N.W.O.B.H.M bands that emerged sometime around 79. So Saxon are in here, but I suppose you could argue precursors to the scene like Judas Priest or Motorhead, bands that influenced the N.W.O.B.H.M scene, are not included. So I think that's actually a useful, a handy way of doing it, because it does mean the focus is very much on a whole slew of really, virtually unknown bands that can be included in here. And I always liked the fact that when I was reading this through for the first time, you would uncover all of these bands that basically just had one single during that period. That's the UK Alcatraz, by the way, slightly different spelling. So alongside bands like Angel Witch, we have other bands. That's probably a good example actually there. Anthem, who had one 7-inch EP out and appeared on a compilation. And then you dig a bit deeper, you've got bands like Atom Craft, which may not be well known, but they had a couple of albums out. And the other thing is it extends up to quite well beyond that initial surge of N.W.O.B.H.M bands. So we've got stuff here that came out in 85. There's A to Z. And then of course it'll move on. Dark Star, remember them. Here we go. So for Def Leppard's entry, it's nice because I know a lot of this you can find on the internet, but it was nice at the time when this came out, 2001. It was, there wasn't really anything equivalent out there. There was I'm trying to remember the name of the writer. There was somebody that used to do a series of books about releases, and they were fairly well documented. I had a couple, but this one really goes into a lot of detail. You can see there's various notes on here as well. So using Def Leppard as an example, you can see it brings it up to 92 there. And also with this extended biography that they do, it does tend to focus quite a bit on that earlier period from, say, 70, when did they sort of start talking about here, like 77 initially, when the band started being put together through to the early 80s, and then any additional, any further period after that, it's a bit of a tighter biography. I think you know what I mean if you've read things like this, where they try and focus on in a period that really represents the scene, if you like. And there's Girl. Of course, they have connections to Def Leppard because of Phil Collins. Yeah. There we go. And Girls' School. Got a nice long one there. And all the various compilation appearances as well. Oh. And what's interesting about here, you get to find out all the other bands that Paul Di'Anno was in as well. And obviously in here we go into the eyes. Oops, I just went past there. There we go, and of course is Iron Maiden. Now, you could, well, I do have a separate book all about Iron Maiden actually, because I'm sure here possibly what they've done is they've condensed down a little bit the ins and outs of the lineups, because it's pretty complicated. But yeah, it does spend a lot of time on the first sort of few albums, and it brings it up to date. Yeah, it's a really good book, and like I said, if you read the introduction, it does imply that it is also aimed at record collectors who collect this particular genre of music. Oh, there's Raven. Just as a side note, a couple of other books I have, I suppose about that period, but they're a bit of a broader church and they're much more general. The books I'm going to show you really were intended for general sort of consumption, and this one, which was reasonably famous at the time, which is a Bible of Heavy Metal, Encyclopedia Metallica. So this came out around 81, and this just is the story with various bands. It goes wider than N.W.O.B.H.M and looks at various scenes over the years, but it's pretty condensed. I mean, a lot of it is those sort of nice black and white photos, and then this one, which I always saw as a sort of companion book to it, which is the H.M A to Z, and that one's you can see it's just a sort of selected, very simplified biography, discography of certain key bands generally. Again, it doesn't focus on N.W.O.B.H.M like this one. This one also came with a free cardboard guitar. Actually, what it was from what I remember, it's long gone now. Maybe I must have done something with it, a bit of air guitar. Yeah, I think it was just a printout of was it a Strat, something like that. And the idea is you just sort of glued it onto a piece of cardboard and cut it out, and you had an instant air guitar. In fact, what I'm going to do is just reminding me of something. I should really include a link to the what was that? There was a documentary program on that went out weekly. I think it was called 20th Century Box, and they do a really interesting series of interviews with various people around the early days of N.W.O.B.H.M. I think it revolves around was it Neil Kay? I think he's the focus of it, who was that famous heavy metal DJ who started playing Iron Maiden and various things like that at a club, and they had a weekly chart. So I should include that in the links. It's fun to watch because they interview what's his name? Was it something Loonhouse? I'm trying to remember the name of these guys, but there were two guys in particular who were famous for doing air guitar, And so there's a couple of interviews with, well, I think there's at least one interview with one of them, and it's pretty amusing to watch now. So there we have it. Very interesting book. I thought I'd share that with you, and obviously relevant because of the recent episode of album musings I did for Pyromania by Def Leppard. So that's the N.W.O.B.H.M Encyclopedia by Malc Macmillan, and it's published by Iron Pages. Don't know if you can still get this, but yeah, it's a fun book. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in the next episode.